When it comes to keeping our texts, chats, and other digital messages safe from prying eyes, we have a powerful tool: end to end encryption. Used correctly, end to end encryption turns our conversations online into secret messages that can only be decoded by their intended recipients.
For years, we've been urging tech companies to bring this privacy protecting tool to more of the apps and platforms we use every day. This month marks an important step forward for encrypted messaging, as well as a notable disappointment. I'm Hudson Hongo.
And I'm Christian Romero. This is Effector from the Electronic Frontier Foundation.
Later, Christian will be giving a quiz on what data of ours is and isn't encrypted.
We'll also let you know about some upcoming opportunities to connect with EFF.
But first, we'll be talking about new developments in end-to-end encryption and how you can use it to prevent tech companies, governments, and other eavesdroppers from listening in. So, Christian, do you remember the first time you heard the phrase end-to-end encryption?
I mean, for me at least, I feel like end-to-end encryption has just always been a thing. I kind of remember when I had my old little flip phone when I was in high school, and then I got an iPod Touch, and I remember that the Messages app on my iPod Touch was end-to-end encryption, and I was like, I don't know what this means, but the bubbles are blue. That's cool.
Yeah, right. Sounds good. Not sure what it means. I think, other people have heard of apps like Signal, which that's sort of the thing about Signal. For me, I think I first became aware of this tool when working as a tech journalist. Not me, but lots of my colleagues used it for talking to people like whistleblowers for conversations where privacy was very, very important. I wrote very stupid blogs. I didn't I didn't break any big whistleblower stories, but I knew people who did.
I think your very goofy blogs are still super important for readers. We need some joy in our lives. But yeah, I mean, there are people who are way better than me at explaining the technical know-how of how end-to-end encryption works. But I think the important takeaway is that the math is mathing. It uses math and some clever techniques to stop people who are in the middle of digital conversations from being able to read them.
Right. Whether that's the tech company that's creating the service that you're using to communicate, anybody who might pressure that tech company, and just any other sort of third party who is not the person you're sending the message or data to. So this is why EFF has been trying to get tech companies to implement it more widely. There has been some success. The big story this month is that Apple, with the latest version of iOS, its mobile operating system, it's rolling out encrypted messages between iPhone users and Android users, which previously was not a feature of the cross-platform messaging.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty big deal. And to dive deeper in what this means for privacy, Hudson talked to our colleague Thorin Klosowski, security and privacy activist at EFF. Let's listen into that.
Well, hi, Thorin. Thanks for making the time to chat.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So today I wanted to talk to you about end-to-end encryption, specifically encrypted messaging, where there have been some fairly big developments this month. First, what is encrypted messaging and why is it important?
Yeah, when we talk about end-to-end encryption, we're usually referring to when messages are encrypted on both ends, thus the name. So it's done in a way so the company who makes the messaging platform can't read the messages. That's kind of the whole point. I think Signal is kind of the most famous example of this sort of messaging. We call it secure messaging, end-to-end encrypted. Different names for, different ways we talk about it, but it all kind of means the same thing.
Yeah, and there are all sorts of circumstances where another party might want access to your messages, whether that's, criminals, the company itself, or the government, right?
Yeah, kind of notoriously recently, Salt Typhoon was a hack that kind of showed how that might happen and why, messages are, it's very important for the companies and telecoms to not have access to them.
The idea is that this kind of encryption, because you said it's encrypted at both ends between the sender and the recipient, these two parties, that effectively makes it impossible for whatever this, private company is to access those messages and provide them to anyone else, like the government under court order.
Yeah, when employed correctly, it makes it impossible for the company to, have anything. And different companies collect different amounts of other data around that. Signal, again, is one of the ones that kind of collects the least amount of additional information called metadata. Whereas other companies like WhatsApp, which is also end-to-end encrypted, collects and stores a lot more of that metadata. So they have more information about like who you're communicating with. They just don't know what you're communicating about.
In any case, though, right, if you're trying to have a private conversation digitally, end-to-end encryption, very important because that actually makes it private.
It's the best way we have right now.
So what are some of the consequences we've seen when private data like messages aren't end-to-end encrypted?
When a company has access to that information, it can get leaked in a data breach. It can get used for something that you might not want it to be used for, whether that's AI training or advertising or something along those lines. It can be shared with the government, with law enforcement. Anything that you do that is in plain text like that you can kind of imagine has probably happened at some point in history.
So again, end-to-end encryption, really important. I know, as you have in this conversation, called it the best way we have to protect our conversations and data. Earlier this year, EFF launched a campaign called Encrypted Already, which was calling on a variety of tech companies to implement end-to-end encryption more widely. So now we have a few updates. I want to start with Apple. What did Apple announce on this front?
Apple released its most recent version of its operating system, 26.5, which includes support for encrypted RCS. RCS is the protocol that replaced SMS quite a while ago on Google's Android phones and more recently on Apple phones. So if you are an Apple user and you've been communicating with Android people and suddenly noticed last year that images no longer look awful when you send them in a text message, that was because of RCS. But we were waiting on the encryption part of that to come along, which the companies had promised they were working on for a long time and was just finally released. So that is just here in May was the kind of, it's been in beta for a little while and just came out like still in beta, but available to the public.
So, right. SMS was like, that's the thing we were using when we were texting each other on flip phones, right? This is like the really bare bones text messaging. Now there's this new protocol that allows all sorts of phones, including an Apple and Android, to have a more kind of modern texting system. But that was not end-to-end encrypted between Apple and Android devices before, right?
Correct. Yeah. And it's up to the telecoms. There's still like a kind of a cascade of other things that need to be working and process with each other for this to kind of like be fully functional on your device and your conversations that you're having. But Apple and Google have kind of done their part on delivering support for it. And now it's kind of up to the telecoms to kind of catch up and like deliver on their end.
So what does make this implementation a big deal?
I mean, it's got to be probably, I assume one of the largest ways that people communicate with each other cross-platform. It is, if you have any conversation with Android and iPhone users that is not using a special app like WhatsApp or Signal, you're probably doing it in the company's proprietary messages platforms. And now those conversations will be encrypted, or they will be soon if they're not already. I don't actually have any on my personal device or in any of my conversations, but they will come eventually.
Yeah, I did want to bring that up, that there are a couple caveats. What do our listeners need to do to make sure that their messages are protected by this?
Yeah, you're just looking for, it'll literally say encrypted with a little lock. And if you're in Google Messages or if you're in Apple's Messages app and you're communicating with someone on apps on the other side. So if you're Android user and you aren't using Google Messages, you will not see that. Apple, you obviously only have one choice for messaging in the US, so you will see it there eventually. It's dependent on your carrier, the person you're communicating is with carrier, and them being updated with the software also. So they need to have the most recent version of iOS, and then the person running Android has to have the most recent version of Google Messages. So there's like a lot of it's a layer of things that can go wrong here. And unfortunately, it's not like a flashing banner that says you're now encrypted. You have to look for this tiny, tiny text that says encrypted. It's the same place where you'll see it say RCS or SMS messaging, like kind of in the middle of the chat window. So you'll see it there eventually. It's just going to be a little while for a lot of people, I imagine.
Well, I'll loop back around at the end about sort of practical advice. But this is, a positive development. I wanted to switch over to a negative development, a pretty disappointing development from Meta. So what happened with Instagram messages and end-to-end encryption?
Yeah, so a long time ago, Meta had promised that it would deliver on end-to-end encrypted messaging on all of its platforms. It eventually did so or I should say, deliver on end-to-end encryption by default on all of its platforms. It eventually did so with Facebook Messenger, which one-to-one conversations are now encrypted by default. And Instagram got an optional version of that. And they claimed that it was, the default was coming someday. And instead of doing that, they decided to just remove the option entirely. So they announced it, I think, about a month ago, and then in early May, they just completely removed even just the optional way to turn on end-to-end encrypted messaging on Instagram.
As I recall, their stated justification was that it wasn't used widely, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it wasn't used because it's kind of a weird buried setting that most people don't bother to or need to know you're not looking for that. Like if you're on Instagram, you're not going to go diving into the settings of each chat that you have to see if it's like privacy protective or not. Like that, this is why defaults matter and why like we really push companies to have a better default state for their settings, because people shouldn't need to think about this stuff. They should just be able to have conversations privately on whatever platform they're using.
Yeah. And Instagram may not primarily be a messaging app, but I know that lots of activists and other people use that platform for organizing and outreach. And the idea that messages between Instagram accounts can't be encrypted, it troubles me.
Yeah, I mean, it troubles me too. And it's unfortunate because it's again, it was a setting that, a lot of people didn't use because they didn't know it was there. If they did know it was there, they probably maybe didn't understand what it would do or change. And there's quirks with a social media platform like this. You can like understand conceptually why Meta would be hesitant about something like this if like people are mostly forwarding other posts or whatever. That's might confuse people on what privacy means, but like, there's education that you can do when you're a bajillion-dollar company to kind of help people understand what is and isn't protected in a conversation like this.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I did want to ask, we recently saw a step forward for end-to-end encryption implementation, a step backward. Given how important this tool is, do you have any sense why more big tech companies aren't implementing this as like an essential security feature?
I mean, I think it's an essential privacy feature is a way that I like to think about it. And I think once you start thinking about it that way, it becomes a little bit more obvious why companies might not be interested in implementing it. They have a lot of government pressure on access to those messages. And if they don't care about the privacy of their users, they are going to instead make it easier for law enforcement to, access people's messages. With end-to-end encryption, it makes it far more difficult for law enforcement to see the contents of those messages. They would have to have access to your actual unlocked device with, that message in hand where they can look at it physically. So like, I think it's as simple as that. There is some technical hurdles there. It's not like it's like, just something you can just turn on and you can just flick a switch and all of a sudden it works magically. It does take work. But we've got a lot of really good protocols. We have a good understanding of how this stuff functions. We've got very smart cryptographers all over the place who would be happy to implement this on large-scale platforms. So it's not like there's not desire for it from an engineering standpoint.
Right. You need resources, but even more important than that, you need will, which, I mean, we've seen for decades, right? There's this sort of push and pull where governments and law enforcement want some way to, break encryption for themselves so that they can see whatever they want without usually the ask is like, but, oh, nobody naughty can go in. Only the good guys can get access. And we could talk for an hour about all the reasons why that's a sort of flawed endeavor. But fundamentally, there's basically a binary between, protected and not protected.
Yeah. I mean, boiling it down to the simplest way possible, if you build a back door, someone will walk through it. Like, if you you can't just make it just for law enforcement. That's just like not fundamentally how computers work. Like someone will find a way into that who is not supposed to be, if not someone in law enforcement. Like there's just so many loopholes there that it is yeah, we would spend an hour talking through them.
But pretty much every time we've seen, a secret door built at government request, big surprise, other people have found it and walked through it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not like, I mean, the kind of fascinating thing here is it's not like Apple and Meta don't know this. They do, and they routinely write letters to governments stating these things. Apple pulled out of one of its features out of the UK whenever they tried forcing a backdoor into it. Like, the companies who make these tools absolutely know what the dangers are there, and it's kind of where we're at.
Okay. Well, maybe we can end on a bit of a different note. I wanted to ask, what are some methods or tools that Effectors listeners can use to benefit from end-to-end encrypted messaging?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest to set up and use out of the box for quite a while has been Signal. It is just kind of works the second you start, install it and you start using it. You don't have to do a lot of like changing of settings or worrying about how the other person might be using it. WhatsApp is also end-to-end encrypted. It does, like I said, Meta collects a little bit more metadata, so there's like some concerns around there around like what the company might have about who you're communicating with and when. Apple's messages between Apple users is always end-to-end encrypted also, the kind of blue messages. Also safe if everyone in the conversation has an Apple device. And similar amount of metadata collected there. And then Google Messages kind of has the same thing, where if everyone's in Google Messages, then it's end-to-end encrypted. And eventually, the Apple to Google conversations will be end-to-end encrypted once all of the aforementioned RCS stuff kind of gets worked out. And that, again, like that's going to depend on carrier. It's going to depend on a lot of things. But someday, hopefully soon, you will see that little encrypted icon with your friend on another platform, and you will know.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's sort of unfortunate that there isn't like a big flashing banner that tells you that it's encrypted, but it is encouraging that they're moving to what it should be, which is just a default that you don't have to think about, right? Like that's sort of the problem with a lot of these various, opt-in, settings dependent versions of encrypted messaging. Is like you have to like really like look and make sure and toggle the right thing when, hey, just have it on.
Yeah, and you might be balancing a bunch of different conversations in a bunch of different places, which gets messy and kind of hard to do, and like not everyone's going to be willing to or able to do that. It's great that we have all these other platforms like Signal, WhatsApp, etc. But the default messaging app that most people use, just being encrypted, is going to be a big win. Once everything is actually rolled out and like functioning, which will hopefully not take very long.
Well, thanks again, Thorin, for stopping by and for fighting for encryption.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Christian, I'll just ask, how are you personally feeling about the adoption of end-to-end encryption? Are you feeling encouraged or discouraged?
I think overall I'm feeling encouraged. I know that Thorin talked about like some ups and downs that we're having, but I think overall people care about this so much more than they used to, like your average user does. And I think that probably has a lot of sway back and forth on this issue.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't going to sound like a very interesting insight, but right, like so much more of our communication happens through these digital channels now. And I think people are seeing what some of the costs are when those conversations are not protected. But the way I think about it is like, it's a long fight. EFF is just only a little bit younger than me. And from the very beginning of our organization, and even before that, there's always been this push and pull between the right to privacy and all of the different parties who think they have some sort of good reason to violate that right.
Yeah, totally, for sure. I mean, it is encouraging to see more like defaults for privacy. I mean, having Apple and Google's default messaging apps be end-to-end encryption, huge. Like no one wants to change a setting, honestly. You shouldn't really have to think about your privacy. You should just have it. I was pretty discouraged to see you and Thorin talked about this a little bit, but the fact that Instagram doesn't have end-to-end encryption in the messaging anymore really sucks with how much I think activism is really happening on that platform and how much like information sharing is happening for sure.
I know it makes me sort of nervous, right? That like these platforms are where people are, so that's where organizing happens. But at the same time, you're like at the mercy of Meta's product decisions. I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, you're gonna have a really hard time convincing your whole, network and everyone on the planet you're trying to connect with, I guess, to switch to a new platform. So,
yeah. Well, I do hope we can arrive at an internet where end-to-end encryption is the default, something people don't even have to think about, which right now, very unfortunately, they do.
quick break to remind you, EFF is a member-supported nonprofit, and your support is what makes this work possible. If you want to help EFF defend and push privacy-preserving tools like end-to-end encryption, head to EFF.org/podfan. For as little as $10 a month, you'll get our latest member t-shirt and join the community of over 30,000 EFF members fighting to make sure technology works for everyone. That's EFF.org/podfan. One more time, EFF.org/PODFAN. All right, back to the show.
Okay, so now we come to the part of the show that makes me the most nervous. I try my best to sound like a knowledgeable guy on the show, and this can be undercut by my success with your quizzes, Christian, which I've had varying success with. What is the quiz today, Professor?
It's my favorite part of the show because I get to sound like the expert. So first off, we talked about EFF site, encrypt it already. Make sure you have that tab closed. We do not allow cheaters in this class.
Okay.
So we're going to do a quiz called Who's the Culprit? I'm going to describe an encryption gap, and you have to guess which company is responsible.
Oh, okay. Okay, a little interesting. I thought for sure you're just going to ask this platform, this sort of data, is it encrypted or not? But this is a little more challenging. This is interesting.
Yeah, and that also sounds like a lot of work to make sure that I'm right.
Okay.
All right. So number one, this app has end-to-end encryption available for one-on-one chats. But the moment you open a group chat, that protection disappears. Who's the culprit?
Okay. I think there's actually a couple platforms that work this way, which is unfortunate. Is it WhatsApp? Is that what you're talking about?
So WhatsApp is also on encrypted already, but this is not the app I'm thinking of. Do you want a second try?
Facebook Messenger.
You've got it. Yes. Facebook Messenger. Yeah. Facebook Messenger, end-to-end encryption for a while. We keep asking, why not group chats? I mean, you've already got it for a little bit. I don't know how hard this is, but they should figure it out.
They have the money.
Yeah, you know what? I shouldn't be sympathetic to a company with as much money as Meta has, for sure.
They don't have any engineers. Nobody knows how to do it.
Yeah, I guess not. All right, number two. This social media platform has been promising end-to-end encryption for direct messages for years now, but it still hasn't delivered. Who's the culprit?
Well, we were talking about Instagram, but it's not that, I assume. You have to tell me.
Have to tell you, it's Blue Sky.
Of course. I have more sympathy for Blue Sky. I have much more sympathy for Blue Sky. Small team, not Meta money.
Yeah, 100%. I can agree with that. These two questions were a part of our Keep Your Promises section on Encrypted already. Just trying to, remind these companies, hey, you said you were going to do this. Let's pick up the pace a little bit. So you always, I guess, have to remind the little guys and the giant companies. All right, moving on. Question 3. This app is famous for being a privacy-forward messaging platform, but there's a little catch. End-to-end encryption is not on by default. You have to change the default yourself. Who's the culprit?
Oh, which one is it? I would also say WhatsApp, but it's not WhatsApp. It's the other one whose name is escaping me at this moment, humiliatingly.
As I'm reading these, I'm like, yeah, I guess these could apply to a lot of companies. So I'll be sympathetic with you, Hudson. This one is Telegram.
Telegram, of course.
All right. Next up, this one's probably a little easier. This company makes home security technology, but it does not protect your footage by default with end-to-end encryption. Who's the culprit?
We're talking about Ring, aren't we?
Oh yeah. Yep. We've got our beef with Ring, but we also want people who use Ring cameras to have security. So these two questions were part of our defaults matter category because, as we've said earlier in the show, users should have privacy by default. No one should be fiddling through 5 menus of settings trying to figure out how to make their lives more secure.
Am I done? How many more?
You got one more. Last one. This is a very popular 2-factor authentication app, which offers great security. But when you back this app up to the cloud, that backup isn't encrypted. Who's the culprit?
Which authenticator app? I don't know.
This one is a Google Authenticator.
Okay.
Which, if I'm being honest, I don't really use because 2FA is in a lot of password managers, which you should also be using a password manager. But yeah, that's our quiz. I honestly think after reading the questions and how vague some of them were, you did pretty good. I think so.
Yeah, I think Thorin would have done better. Who led this project?
Let's just get him on the call right now. No.
And now, events and opportunities. Christian, how can people connect with EFF in the weeks to come?
Yeah, next week on May 26th, EFF members can hang out with their fellow digital freedom supporters for our Bay Area Members Speakeasy. We're teaming up with Women in Security and Privacy to have an in-depth conversation with Cindy Cohen about Privacy's Defender. Current members should be on the lookout for an email invite. Then, on June 4th, we're hosting our annual Cyber Law Trivia Night at Public Works in San Francisco. We're bringing lawyers together for the ultimate battle of mastery over privacy, free speech, and intellectual property law. You can register yourself or a full team today. And of course, you can learn more about these events and other ways to see EFF at eff.org/events.
Thanks, Christian. Well, that's it for this week's Effector. Effector is a podcast by the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the leading nonprofit defending online civil liberties. Our music is I Dunno by Grapes.
EFF promotes digital innovation, defends free speech, fights illegal surveillance, and protects digital rights and freedoms for all. Become an EFF member today at eff.org/podfan.
Your organization can also join the fight for digital freedom by supporting EFF and this podcast. Our work inspires a broad audience of activists, technologists, legal experts, creators, gamers, hackers, and everyone who relies on digital tools in their daily lives. Learn more about sponsorship at eff.org/thanks.